Hi folks, this is Alan Watt. It is November the 23rd, 2006. Tonight I'm bowing to a little bit of pressure. I don't normally bow to any kind of pressure, but this will tie in with some of the talks I've given in the past, and it's about the culture creation industry, how ideas are downloaded into people's minds via fiction primarily, using high drama with emotion plus crisis. A situation in a movie and drama is a tremendous method of getting points across. It's almost like coupling an idea with the drama, and it's downloaded like a virus into your subconscious, and you're being programmed, and it's called predictive programming. The technique is ancient, and it's an old science. Plato, in his Republic, talks about the culture industry of his own day, and how it was essential not only for maintaining control over the people by the elite, but that they had to control everything that was given to the public. In other words, anything the public saw in drama on stage was authorized. Not only was it authorized, in ancient Greece, traveling troops of players would come into the cities and do their rounds, and it was compulsory to attend. Everyone, even the slaves, had to attend at least one performance, because just like today, they had their agenda and their schedule and their upgrading of the system, and it was done primarily through fiction, because the old saying is monkey see, monkey do, and we emulate what we see, especially when it's done in a typical hero and heroine form. The male will project himself into the hero's part and identify with the hero character, and the female, at least in the old days before all the vast estrogen stuff in their food and so on, and inoculations, the females used to look towards the heroine. This is an ancient science. It's never ever given up, and actors are hereditary. The families in acting can go back probably hundreds, maybe some of them maybe thousands of years. Specialized sections of society, once more, and they marry each other and intermarry within even smaller ranks. What's more interesting is the producers, the magicians, you might say, who understand and have a full grasp of what is to be conveyed to the audience, what messages must be imprinted in them, in their minds, and he knows the techniques and how to do this perfectly. A perfect science. Now, what's interesting is that back in the 1960s, the Royal Institute of International Affairs and its American branch, Council on Foreign Relations, had one of their international meetings. They held it in England to decide which country, using its film industry, would create the international culture of the future. And this was in the newspapers back then. And it was, I think, 2 or 3 week long meeting. And it was ultimately agreed upon that Hollywood would be given the job to create the worldwide culture for the general public, for a global society. And it would also be coupled with the music industry, obviously, because they go hand in glove, as Plato said, plus the fashion industry. Plato mentioned that too, and he called it the fashion industry in ancient Greece. Nothing. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And if something works, you don't want to change it. Why change it? Formula of human behavior is just a science. Each part of the direction that you want it to go into is just the ability to understand the formulas involved and what buttons to push and what sequence. And it is done in the right way, the right presentation, with the right propaganda, the public will react and do exactly as they're being programmed to do. It's worked in the past, it will work in the future. That's why they're utterly confident that they can change society, even back to infanticide if they wish to, because they'd done that in ancient Greece. So it was taught and practiced there. So anything can be reintroduced if it's been done in human society before. You just have to know the formula to introduce it. So Hollywood, this amazing industry, probably one of the biggest exports now, maybe the only one left in the US apart from the military. Hollywood is called the Holy Wood. It's the Holy Wood, of course, is a staff of the Magi, of the Magus, the Grand Magus in the occults. He waves a wand and everything is altered, changed. He casts a spell. And it's portrayed even in the cartoons with Mickey Mouse with his little wand, as he's dressed like the wizard. And little stars, 5-pointed stars, come from the wand. Earth, air, fire, water, spirit, the 5 points. That's what it means. High drama. And in the ancient Middle Eastern legends, all the holy men there had their staff. We even find it in the Old Testament as Moses has the little contest with the Pharaoh's Magi, and they play it changing sticks into snakes and back again, which is a good trick. But the trick of conducting a spell over the audience is by using a staff, the holy wood. The holy wood also, on another level, is the grove, because in ancient times and in the present times, the bigger boys like to meet in specialized places across the planet in their holy groves. Very, very important. There's much more to this even in Jewish folklore about the groves. And Moses' brass serpent that was coiled around the staff that had made, it's all allegory, of course, for something else, which I understand, but supposedly it was placed in a grove surrounded by trees. And that was a special place for the higher Magi to meet. I'll be going into some movies that will show you the understanding within Hollywood, at least in the director's part. Many of the actors don't even understand it themselves, but the directors and producers certainly do. And some of the bigger ones are given the information and their advice on how to get it across to the public. It's not that they have geniuses within Hollywood, per se. they have special insight through a crystal ball into the future, is because their job is to program us as we go into the future, always. Hollywood has been an essential part of government, especially in the United States. There are books out on Hollywood's involvement with making war movies. They churned out I don't know how many war movies in World War II, and they had the full cooperation of the American military, and the use of squadrons of tanks and ships and everything to make it very, very realistic, to get the recruitment going to fight the Nazis and then the Japanese. Tremendous part of propaganda, and it's never stopped. And even today, the Pentagon admits they have funded some of the bigger movies to do with war and Jarhead and all this kind of nonsense to get the young guys in for recruits. Now, just jumping back a little bit into the 1500s, a period of tremendous change in Europe, when the Rosicrucians were coming out into the open and recruiting heavily amongst what was then the up-and-coming middle-class youth, especially those involved in sciences. Science is very important to them. And a whole bunch of characters were around the court of Queen Elizabeth I, very important people in an important age. You can find John Dee there. Flood was there as well. And Flood is the man primarily responsible for the creation of the Globe Theatre, which was for Shakespearean plays. And nothing is by accident. And Robert Flood was also an alchemist. He was involved in architecture in the Hermetic tradition, which means that they wanted to unite heaven and earth. Always the same Hermetic tradition, the unification of both spirit and matter, the perfection of the world. In their eyes, of course, they knew and always did know that the understanding was for those in the know. For the profane and for the masses, they would simply be slaves. They had no qualms about differentiating themselves as a higher class of people, a specialized type, intellectual type. And Stratford-upon-Avon, if you break it down, it means a straight ford upon Avon, the river. And a ford is to cross a river, and if you draw it, you have the shape of a cross. And they always say you meet the devil at the crossroads. Avon is nova, new. So it's the new straight cross. That's what it meant. And Shakespeare, or Jacques Pierre, the priest of the father, was the magician who brought basically the English language into being as we know it. It's been upgraded since, but that was a major upgrade in that particular period. Before that, it was before that Chaucer had upgraded the last one with Canterbury Tales and other writings, and before that it was Old Norse and Saxon German that the people spoke. So a new language was created scientifically. It's fully encoded, of course, and it's a pity as well because we've lost so much of it. We're losing so many words that eventually we won't be able to convey anything to anyone else with any precision, and that's called linguistic minimalism, a technique which has also been used on the public because the children, for a long time, for generations, have been getting their vocabulary from the media and from their music and the heroes that they follow. God help us if we all end up following the sports teams members, because if you want linguistic minimalism, when they interview these players after a match, you've got it right there. So the 1500s was a tremendously important time. It was also, as I say, the introduction of the Hermetic thought, the perfection of man, which means more than just a superficial perfection. They're talking about going all the way into the real religion, which is to recreate that which was separated from God. And that goes back to the allegory of Adam and Eve. Because in the separation, Adam retained the spirit that was given, whereas Eve was given the ability to recreate humanity, to give humanity offspring. And that's the big secret in Masonry. And that's why they don't really appreciate women so much. They have no spirit. And Albert Pike said that the woman can only reflect the light of her husband. He is the sun, she's the moon. The moon has no light of its own, it reflects light from the sun. This is all they're put down of the female. And their perfection would be when they united the two together. It's an ancient religion. It's pre-Judaic. And I've never lost sight of this goal, where everything will be in harmony, supposedly, again, according to them. But then they do give you their ending at the beginning. That's the trick of religion, to give you a beginning, which really is their end. Getting back to the 1500s, Queen Elizabeth the first sponsored these Rosicrucians to write plays, and she attended most of them herself. And Christopher Marlowe was probably the odd man out, because he wrote about this Hermetic group who were bringing the occult into their stage plays. And because of that, he exposed too much. It's debatable if he was one of them himself and said too much, or if he was actually truly opposing them. But he was like Dagobert long before him. He was stabbed through the eye, which is the Masonic technique for one who sees too much. There is so much I could go into, and it's a shame in a sense to do this as a spontaneous blurb off the top of my head, but at the moment time is of the essence, and so everything is pretty well spontaneous. So what I'll concentrate on tonight are a few movies which have been very telling in their information and their understanding of the system. And also, as always, you have your predictive programming, because in the revelation of the method in high esoteric circles, you can also put in there an idea of inevitability as well. It familiarizes us with an idea so that when it actually comes into place, we accept it without question as somehow being normal. I like to talk about the movie called Network, which came out in 1976. A story about a guy working as a TV anchorman who gets a kind of messianic brainstorm one day and starts telling the truth to the public. And one of his statements is you're the real people to the audience. We're fake. When he realizes that the audience are trying to emulate a fiction, because everything you see on television is a fiction. It's directed, it's produced, it's not spontaneous. Guests, when they're on a question-answer show of any kind, have the pre-planned questions there, I watched a little blurb about Kissinger and found out when he came to Canada that the guy who manages Kissinger, and they're all managed too, had a suggested set of questions that they could ask Kissinger, and anything not on that list would simply not be answered, or they can walk off the set. There's nothing spontaneous on television. Everything is produced as fake. It's fake. It's an essential arm of controlling your mind. Always has been. But in the movie Network, as he has these convulsive fits and then comes out with these messianic announcements in a comical fashion, he says a lot of truth, and eventually he's called up to see one of the big boys, one of the big guys who run the system, who runs it, and the guy tells him, he says that there is no America. He says everything is just one vast corporation, an association of corporations. There's no Britain, there's no America, there's no Holland, there's no China, there's no Russia. It's just one conglomerate group of corporations. Money runs the thing. And that was true. That is true, because that's how it is. The economy, everything beginning with E in our language, is of prime importance. Prime importance is at the top. And that's well worth a look at the Network and what they disclose there to a public that just chew bubblegum and pop their popcorn and get downloaded and yet can't even remember what they see or do. The second movie is pretty famous in some circles. It's called They Live, done in 1988, where it does show you the system, again in allegorical type form. They do it blatantly and show you the sort of mind control techniques of advertising, the types of people who live amongst you, who look like you but they're not you at all. And in the real world, you'll find that in Freemasonry, because there is a definite feedback from along through Masonry of information to do with the public and places they live in. They collect data on everyone. And the Eastern Star is famous for that. They collect data. And I do know someone who's confronted a high-ranking member of the Eastern Star, and she did admit that. And I do know that in a place I used to live, the Grand Master of the local lodge there were around all these elderly women who were Eastern Star members, and he collected the data, the what's what on everybody, the gossip. So it's well worth a look at how They Live, done in allegorical form. They have the alien twist in it, of course, which is highly popularized by the authorized guys in some countries. I was asked to do a documentary by one of these well-known guys, but then when he found out I wouldn't push the alien agenda, that's the last I heard from him. He phoned me, by the way. Third movie is the original Wicker Man, made in 1974. Very revealing movie on the religion that runs the world, with an outward form of nature worship, but also with an elite group at the top who play with people, and that's a very key part of it. They play with people as though they were bored. They know how we think. And in The Wicker Man, a policeman is sent from his little area in Scotland to an island off the west coast of Scotland, supposedly, to investigate a missing girl. And he's been actually lured there. And the whole movie is about how he's played with and how he comes across clues that are left out for him to pick up, knowing with each clue how his mind will work to the next part, and the next part, and the next part, to the very end, where he has become the willing fool for the sacrifice. He was a king's representative, so he was important. He came willingly. very important too. He was a virgin, very unique these days. But what was kind of funny to me was to see how they put a policeman there. Now, most policemen are pretty well Freemasons because it's almost mandatory to become a Freemason when you join the police force, the fraternity, the brotherhood of the police. And anyone who's visited policemen's homes will see their photograph of the person with their police cadet uniform on at graduation, and next to it is the Masonic one with their gloves and all the rest of it, because they must swear allegiance first to each other before they swear allegiance to serve you. They don't serve you, they serve the elite to employ them, protect and serve. But in the Wicker Man, he has the policeman has the proper British type and the British Commonwealth country type hat on, and round the hat's a band of black and white squares. It's a chessboard, it's a tesserated floor of Freemasonry as well. It's the two opposites, it's also the heaven and hell. They have the right to use the black force when necessary. And that's why they stand up for each other as well, and often change their little books and their stories to justify what they're doing. So that was the only part that didn't make sense, of course, but it takes someone to understand that, to see that. But well worth to look at is The Wicker Man. The original one, made in 1974. I believe there's a later one out which is going right off the wall, where there's some sort of monster involved. Another movie to see, which I didn't know was even out there, came out in 2003. Not publicized, just like The Wicker Man, was a movie called Control Factor. Excellent movie, which has a lot of fact in there to do with mind control, using microwave frequencies and the little microwave towers all around cities to control the minds of the public, but also a specialized secretive group of scientists with full authority using advanced types of weaponry who go in and chip the brains of certain individuals within the cities. They actually use in the Control Factor real data that's been disclosed to the public from books such as Zbigniew Brzezinski, Between Two Ages in the Technotronic Era, and they use the terms technotronic, etc. And everything in that movie can be done today. Actually, it's old stuff. Whatever is disclosed to the public is actually obsolete in a sense. They're so far beyond because there are 3 levels of science. And from professorship down, that's all the public domain. That's the lowest level. The CIA on the higher levels, compartmentalized levels, the higher levels, they have equipment which is beyond science fiction. And then it's a higher level above that for the real controllers, because you never share ultimate power with the rest who help you. So Control Factor 2003 has even been shown across European countries, and as I say, I never heard of it here till someone in Belgium brought it to my attention. Well worth seeing. Another one to look at is from Germany, but it's available in the stores over here for rent, made in 2002, and it's called The Experiment, with English subtitles. Excellent movie on a topic I've mentioned before, how people become what they work at, like Mr. Postman and Mr. Policeman and Mr. Soldier and this kind of thing. But the experiment, and these experiments have been done many times over, I'm sure. It takes place in a mock prison, and a whole group of people come in. I think there's 20 of them. 10 are dressed up as the prison wardens, 10 as the prisoners, and in a short space of time, the control freaks within the warden society begin to become the wardens and use the same techniques and measures against the prisoners. And in no time at all, you've got a real situation going. It shows you, it's a very good expose on how easily people are persuaded and controlled and indoctrinated to become that which their masters want them to be. One of the most commonly talked about movies to do with, the scary stuff, oh, children, I want to drink your blood, is Eyes Wide Shut, done in 1999. Very well done by Stanley Kubrick, who was high up there in the high Freemasonry. He did 2001 and 2010 for Arthur C. Clarke, so he understood the agenda. He died just after the movie. Some say that he went too far with the movie. Again, that could be speculation. And you have to watch it and follow it to understand what's going on. And even then, take note of the street names and all of the names you hear in that movie, and pronounce them backwards and forwards and so on. There's a lot more in it than most people ever imagine. You'll see that the type of ceremony they'll have at the top, where do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, where there's mass promiscuity within these secret meetings, orgies, you might say. And masked as always, they love the masks at the top. And the masks are the ones of ancient Egypt, the Hermetical sciences again, with a jackal head and various other heads on different people. You'll see Thoth in there. Sometimes it's called Thoth or Thoth of Egypt. And the simple secret behind Thoth, who brought writing and mathematics and all this to society, it's not a person or a thing, it's thought. That's where the word comes from, thought. You see. Most people never do it, never use their own thought. But Eyes Wide Shut shows you again, similar to The Wicker Man, how an elite play with one character right through the whole movie. And this character has no idea he's been led along. He's coming to the conclusions they want him to come to. He goes places to find out what the mystery is, and they always know he's going to go there. They in a sense lead him on the whole way, right through the whole movie. And they kill people in the movie just because to them it's a game, it's nothing. They're untouchable by society. There's no police going to come after them. No inquiry. Well worth seeing. And these groups do exist. Another good one to see is called THX 1138. And this is a speculation on a society which is totally controlled and bred for their purposes. And they live underground. They never get to the surface, but they work at the jobs that's dictated for them. They're drugged all day, they're tested, their urine's tested to make sure they have enough of this or that drug. They have speakers that talk to them, tell them what drugs to take, or take more of this, etc. A totally regulated system where they're never fully conscious. They have no sense, really, of individuality in this movie. A comical part is where they even have a computer screen where you can go and make confession. And a picture of a priest comes on, and you tell him all your little thoughts, and of course it's going right to the controllers at the top. Well, what's new, eh? But well worth seeing. Another good one is Logan's Run. And that was made as far back as 1975 with Michael York. And again, an artificially created society where no one grows past the age of, I don't know if it was 29 or 30. And when they get to that age, a little implanted chip starts to glow in the palm of their hand, and they go into a sort of circus where everyone comes around in an arena. An arena just comes from the word Aaron, high priest. And they sit there and they watch what they think is a religious experience, where these people are going to the next life, and in reality they're being killed off, and the whole system is run by computers. That was the way of taking care of their population problem. There are no old people in the movie, interestingly enough. Christopher Walken has been in some interesting movies. I think one of them, as far back as 1972, was first called The Happiness Cage, and then it came out under The Mind Snatchers, where he's a soldier who causes trouble, young and cocky in the military, and he's taken off for medical experiments. And the whole movie is about him figuring out what's happening, and it's very Tavistock in its setup. And they do have these institutions, by the way. And the whole idea is to implant you with a form of chip and control you remotely. Now, they've done that in Tavistock, as Aldous Huxley talked about on his talk at Berkeley, which is on this website. And Huxley, this great winner, thought this was fantastic, a great improvement in society, sticking wires in their head and punching buttons and getting them to move like robots. So that was in that particular movie, The Mind Snatchers. Walken was also in another one put out in '83, and it was called Brainstorm, where he's a scientist involved in making a machine or a form of headgear that would interface with computers and be able to transmit people's minds across distances and be picked up again by other computers. This isn't fantasy either. These things actually do exist. It's always used eventually, even in the movie, for military purposes. But it's well worth looking at this movie to see how far back they were showing the public this kind of thing. And as I say, it's a form of telling you in a legalistic sense what's coming, but it's also a form of programming you to simply accept it when it really comes into reality. Predictive programming. We don't question things when we're sort of kind of vaguely familiar with the idea, the concept of it. And the scientists will come out on television and tell you, well, that's progress, you see. Well, who defines what progress is? It's not us. But then we don't have a say in anything at all. And that's a fact. There is no democracy. There never was. There's only the agenda. Now at Loyola University in Louisiana, they've had a couple of meetings there, the World Science Meetings, paid for by the U.S. Department of Commerce, to do with chipping the entire population of the planet, except for the elite, of course. And they've put out hundreds of pages on this. Putting chips in the brains of people will give peace to the world, and regionalized computers would eventually control people and program them for their jobs, so you can be a plumber one day and an electrician the other. It won't matter to you because you won't even know or remember it. And you will not have any individuality. The ghost in the machine won't be able to connect anymore. And at the first meeting they had, they said that this agenda would be promoted to the public to familiarize them with the idea through novels, through cartoons, movies, etc. Well, that's already been done. There are movies out now under different guises, bring it into us in different fashions, different ways, but always the same conclusion. And it wasn't long after the first meeting that Final Cut, the movie with Robert Williams, 2004, that came out, and other ones have followed suit. Just to get used to an idea of having something in you which could monitor your activities like a camera, your thoughts like a camera, what you see like a camera, what you hear, and play it back after you're deceased to anyone who wants to hear it. That'll be a great boon for the police too, eh? They won't have to ask you questions about anything, they'll just have to tap into your chip. The cartoons have heroes with them, with chips now, with superpowers. That's how they'll sell it to the young. Now, at these meetings, they never ever discussed politics. They didn't even mention governments, because these characters, these high scientists, know that these are just a show for the public. They work for the real boys. So they speak with authority when they speak. And they said this will be promoted through these methods. Cartoons, movies, etc. and novels. And it's quite easy to do, but when you look at especially cultural organizations, interestingly enough, in the Soviet system, they had a department of culture. The government had a department of culture. And when I was growing up, I realized we have one in Britain too. And Canada's got a Department of Culture. Well, why would you need that? Well, you need it because their job is to dish out money to certain authors, often with instructions, to build stories around particular ideas. That's how it's done. That's how you guide culture. You can't have any old guy coming along with a story, not on the script, not on the format, and doing his thing, and everybody loving it. So that everything's done by grants within the arts industry. And high masonry, of course. A good mason never asks why anything. He immediately must obey the order from a superior. And that's how they get ahead in life. All politicians do it. They don't think for a second, they don't guess what's going on. It doesn't twig eventually what's going on. They clue in not to ask questions. You're a good boy if you don't ask questions. You just obey. That's how the whole structure works. So check out Final Cut and other ones. Some of them are pretty awful and third rate, but I'm sure they put more money into it as they really try to familiarize us with the idea. They haven't yet, I don't think, put out movies where a child is found who's been kidnapped because they have a chip. I'm surprised that these things on these TV dramas they have. There's nothing on television anymore except sports, TV dramas, lawyer dramas, and hospital dramas. The main areas of controlling you see, medicine, law, etc. So I'm surprised they haven't put a movie out with some little cutie is kidnapped and everybody's biting their nails wondering what's happening, and here's the guys with their, all their test tubes and DNA samples and their little tracker for the chip, and they find them at the end, and Bruce Willis or some will get the big part, and he'll go and storm there like Rambo and rescue them at the end, and they'll thank the scientists that designed it and all that. That will come if it's not out already. And one really, really good movie which makes you think. You see, some movies make you think. Most don't. You get downloaded through emotion. We call it emotive responses, emotive indoctrinations. But in Devil's Advocate, the movie shows you the nature of man. And there's a lot of good quips in there where the devil, has the biggest law firm in New York, it talks to a guy who doesn't know that he's actually the son of the devil, who's been trained to take over. And he tells him how they're taking over, how they're taking the world over. He said, it's by turning out armies of lawyers. Millions of them. Millions and millions of lawyers. The through law that you're manacled and you can't move and you can't speak. It's all through law. Law is a wall around your mind. These are a few movies to look at more carefully. Those who have seen them, perhaps you'll look at them more carefully than you did before. Tremendously revealing, because there's always the revelation of the method for those who are wise enough to see and hear it. There's always an expose of how it's done and why it's done for those who can hear and see. It's like the Globe Theatre, as I say, that built for Shakespeare, the Shakespearean plays. It wasn't called the Globe for nothing. The globe, the world, where the stage went down into the audience. And in those days, they brought in audience participation. They made you involved, you get involved in the story. And many people got carried away with the drama and thought it was all real. And when that happens, the actors know they're convincing, it's working. When the audience forgets they're watching a fake, they're watching an act, then the actors are doing their job, and it's getting across to the people that they're convinced, because now you've inserted into their minds the possibility that whatever you're showing them can be real or is real. And you've actually changed them, the alchemical change. You've changed them. You've cast a spell upon them. That's how it's done. In the esoteric traditions, the stage became a microcosm of the macrocosm, where all knowledge, which is true, is stored within the person. But it's also, the person is a miniature of the entire universe. Everything that's out there is contained within. That's part of the religion of the esoteric occultic groups at the top. A play itself could be called a talisman in a sense, a talismanic microcosm. They could actually use theatrical effects, even in Shakespeare's time, for thunder. Many different kinds of stage effects were very, very convincing. They even had the burning of Troy, a large play, huge play, performed there, and the conflagration of Rome. And had dozens and dozens of altars all around the stages for the burning of apparently the sacrifices. Nothing was spared in the effects of the period to cast a spell upon the public. Now, the public always think they're simply going to be entertained for fun, to enjoy themselves, and often they are. But they never realize that their way is being shaped for them, that their thinking is actually being shaped for them. They're looking into an area where they'd never have gone themselves in their own lives. But it's being presented to them, and they participate in the play, in a sense. Now, at one time, the magus, as they call him, the magician, in the Rosicrucian Masonic tradition, was on a personal quest for understanding themselves in relation to the macrocosm. And it was in the same period that a split took place in the 1500s, where certain of their members became politicized and wanted to control the entire population of the world. That was their intention eventually, was to control and recreate, remake everything that was left imperfect. That's what they say. Everything that was left imperfect because no true thought went into the design of the world. It was a spontaneous act of bringing into existence. And they believed that as they attained godhood themselves individually, they had the right, therefore, to remake the world as it should be. This has never ceased, this particular ideology, and the elite are following it still. That means everything. That's why you're seeing all the modified food, apart to dumb the public down, of course, and to kill you off quicker, which it will. They definitely will. Population control. But they want to modify everything. Everything on the planet. Perfect it. Now this was shown in their architecture of the layouts of their buildings, the 15, 16, 1700s into the 1800s. You can see some of the big estates even today that are left over, and look at the shapes of their gardens, how they're laid out in geometrical patterns, the reflection of the macrocosm into the microcosm, and vice versa. It was to create the harmony, and that's their terminology, between heaven and earth. Harmony. They put great faith in doing this. That you will see it's a much older tradition than simply from the 1500s. You will see it in the big cathedrals that were built in the early 11th century onwards. You'll see the tremendously domed ceilings, and the acoustics are incredible. The mathematical work that went into making all of these interlacing domes, and almost what they were doing by using the huge beams and shaping them into points at the top as they all met, the arches inside the churches, was trying to recreate nature. They all represented the trees and the boughs all coming together. This is what you're seeing, although you're not generally aware of it, a more perfected form of nature. That's what it's all about. And the inheritors of these sciences are still working at it today, unbeknownst to the public, and they have total control of the one thing which makes the world go around. It's called money. Now, what was here before, the idea or money, or did they come together with the same idea? Well, you can bet your bottom dollar, because you can go back to ancient times and find out that this mystery religion was on the go thousands of years ago, and using money to get its way, and conquering people and forcing them to use money to get them in the system. Once you have it all done worldwide, it is your system. Everyone's trained to earn money. And above everything in this system is the system called economics. Is it there to serve us, or are we there to serve it? Well, the latter is true, according to the economists. The suffering that goes along with it is irrelevant. It's just a side effect of it. You can't help that, you see. That's what they say. We're run by a system, an occultic system, by sciences which are still passed on through certain families and through archives. The real histories and the methodologies, the science of how our minds work and how our minds can be manipulated throughout our whole lives. A science kept to a few that put Freud in the kindergarten category. And one can only read the ancient Greek philosophers to get a whiff of that, because they were way, way beyond Freud. with their techniques. As I say, this is a big topic to go into, and I'd rather have done a worked out series rather than just a spontaneous blurb. But there are so many things to do at the moment, so many things to be done, and time is getting short for everyone as we race along to totalitarianism, which is all around us now, at least in law, and the mechanisms to enforce it are all up and ready. It's not a pretty thing to contemplate, but we must look at what is there in order to come through. And in all ages there have been a few who come through, a few with memory. And memory is very important. Very important. Good night from me. I'm a dog, Hamish. And may your God, or your dog, go with you. Hi folks, this is Alan Watt. It is November the 24th, 2006, and at the beginning someone's emailed me and reminded me to tell the people that I have books for sale and CDs of ancient history and religions, how they started up and how they manipulated the public and how well organized they were for the job at hand. I also have DVDs for sale as well, the Reality Check 1 and 2, which are certainly getting around. And there's lots of information in it, and I'm trying to show the people the real world they're living in, not the one that's been indoctrinated into them by media osmosis and education, but the real world that exists, outside the sheepfold. Because we are in a sheep pen, we've been kept there and fed, you might say, by the good shepherds, who always seem to be up here somehow, these special people who come down from different birth canals and the rest of us, and are given almost a holy status, but it's really a media image to build them up into these fatherly figures. You know. old techniques, but using modern technology is very effective. So I cut through this in the DVDs that I have for sale. So check out the site, cuttingthroughthematrix.com. Other people now have mentioned in emails that they noticed that a few days after I talk about something, the authorized biggies up there have guests on talking about the same subject. Well, that's not surprising, because, see, I'm unauthorized. I don't have handlers handling me. I don't have the backing that they have, too. And for the reason we're in such a mess is because all down through time, but mainly, or mostly, definitely, more of the indoctrination technique has been used since the 1800s onwards. And the public are given their leaders. Simple as that. All sides of everything are given leaders. And often the leaders are groomed in advance before movements are even started. They don't want to take the chance that a true grassroots movement might pop up and with its own leader. So they gave us the leaders, and that's why we're always left in a lurch at the last minute before we go on to the next stage of this agenda, this worldwide agenda, where we're treated as the profane, those in the darkness, by those in the light, supposedly. I don't know if they're in the light, but there sure is an awful smell of sulfur. Tonight, I was going to continue with the movie industry, because the movie industry, as I said last night, is there to indoctrinate you into possibilities which you swallow as possibilities, and then they actually come out in reality. This technique has been used very effectively since the BBC, in fact, first started up as a radio station for World War I, and they used plays and dramas in serial form, so that you should tune in every day to get the next part of the exciting story. And it always made sure that it was a cliffhanger at the end of the hour. And then, sure enough, everyone tuned in the next day at the right time to get the next part of the story. But in amongst the drama, they were getting propaganda to do with World War I and why the young guys should join up and how much they'd be respected by the women, and they'd be heroes. And this is how the technique is used upon the young people's minds. That's why they don't use older guys in the military, except for generals and so on. Young guys think they're immortal. They want, because of the tribal instinct within them, they want to be a hero. They want to stand out and save the tribe. That's what sports are portraying too. And young people don't think they'll die. They think they're indestructible. Death is a far-off thing for other people, but not for them. So the BBC used this technique to the full in World War I, and even had dramas out for the women, and coaxed them to wear a white feather in their hat if their boyfriend or fiancé wouldn't join the army. And they'd wear that in the streets to let all the public and their neighbours know that their boyfriend was a coward, you see. Joe Public thinks he's being entertained by just people in business who are there just for business reasons and who give you what you want, which is entertainment. But no, as I said last night, they've had international meetings on the culture industry. They still do every year, by the way, in early September. The international censorship committees of all the countries, which you think is there to decide how much or you should be protected from garbage or filth or whatever is your thing. You think, why would they have an international meeting? Well, to see if the public, to come to consensus, to see if the public worldwide are ready for the next step of the agenda. And that's why you're seeing specific types of comedies. You're seeing all sexual variations, sexual typing, subtypes, intertypes, and all kinds of types, you might say. This is no accident. This is all planned this way. And every year they push the envelope, as they say, to the next step, to the next step. And I said years ago, that eventually you would see live sex eventually take place, even in comedy shows, and it would get to be routine. Every year the censorship committees debate if the polls that they've taken and all the studies they've done on the general public show that they're ready for the next step. That's how it's done. To bring in a totally new world order, and I mean totally new world order, you must create chaos. All that was must be leveled, destroyed, to bring in the new. This is the high Masonic tradition. So all that was is destroyed to bring in the new, or that which might be, as they say. And getting back to the usual people who do the rounds of what they call the Patriot Network. Now, the Patriot Network, remember, is also a business. It's always been a business, big business, long before 9/11. And a Toronto Star article quite a few years ago explained that the CIA set up the shortwave for broadcasting, public broadcasting, back in the 60s or 50s even, with the intent of using selected Christians as a front against communism, so their propaganda would counter communism. That was supposedly the idea. Personally, I'm a bit doubtful if the CIA ever let go of their hold on these particular programs. Now, in with them, this programming, they're always selling what I call panic items, and heavily funded by the gold and silver industry. Now, there's very few outlets for these people to sell their products in today's happy-go-lucky society, where everybody's, well, you know where they are. The last thing on their mind is gold and silver. So the only medium they can have is to present themselves on radio and push it there with an audience who are always on the verge of panic. And often some of these shows, under the guise of patriotism, are actually 1 hour or 2 hour advertisements. The technique is where they hype them up about the coming collapse of the economy. This has been going on for 40 years now, this sort of stuff for the same people. And near the end of the hour, once they've got their audience petrified, they come forth with the answer, which is to buy their gold and silver. And there's a whole bunch of other products. And unfortunately, the counter-health industry, which is owned by the same ones that own the other side of the health industry, are selling all kinds of junk and gizmos to people who are sick and who are so desperate they'll try anything. So you'll find all of these products in this whole wrapped up in the Patriot business. And the other part of the Patriot business is really an American thing. It was designed specifically for America. This is psychopolitics, a science known a long, long time ago, that you give a type of culture and superimpose it with a dominant religion generally. And then you manipulate the religion and the people towards a definite goal, an outcome. And that's why the U.S. was given more of a dose of, and heavily financed to get the messages across to the people, but a massive dose of religion. And it was really a form of, it was Schofield really. Schofield brought out the Schofield Bible, and he was paid by Rothschilds to do it. And he made a few alterations there to try to boost up revelations, to make the public think that which was to happen in the next 100 years was planned. It was all planned by God. And it's amazing how it's worked on the minds of the public. Tremendous indoctrinations, repeated over and over and over by countless front Christian people on the Patriot Network, generally calling themselves right-wing. Other ones are British Israel under many different guises. They're British Israel, but always pushing the same products, the same hype, and then terrifying the listeners, and then telling them, "Don't worry, it's God's will. You know, God's in control." After they've just scared the bejesus out of you. And the U.S. under psychopolitics was decided long ago they would use religion to make them go along with this New World Order agenda. And it certainly has done the trick with a lot of people. Now, having said all that, where was I going with it? Oh, yeah. It was because on the Patriot Network, often after I've said something, the well-known people who do the rounds of the networks are suddenly all over the airwaves, repeating what I've said and then spinning it back off into revelations or it's God's will and so on. So that's again how you counter intelligence. You counter it by using the same information, attaching aliens, reptiles, or God to it, and you spin it off. That's counterintelligence. Now that I've said all that, I'll get back to part 2 of movies, specific movies to watch that have predictive programming in them. That which you see in a movie form becomes acceptable subconsciously, so that when it comes in reality, you don't react to it. You're familiarized with the idea. And in the movie, of course, it's always presented as a necessity. And in other words, all the bugs have been ironed out subconsciously in your mind for you. It's been downloaded into you, the whole idea and why it's done. So, this is Hollywood. The CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is a sort of royal shell company. A shell company is a strange company that's attached to the government in British Commonwealth countries and in Britain. It's a duplicate, really, of the BBC. It's paid for by tax money. To get into it, you'd probably have to climb a ladder through the degrees and jump through hoops and be well connected in the families, because they don't want, again, grassroots getting into media and getting a voice out to the people. They keep it self-contained with all of its programming. That's why it's called programming. You're programmed by it. But they put out some good stuff as well, almost legality, and they did a series earlier this year, which is worthwhile trying to get a hold of, because it shows you the entertainment industry and the debauchery that they created in certain countries just prior to World War II, starting in the Depression and going on from there. In the Depression, they could hire so many people in poverty and put them on the stage, mainly women, and it was amazing what they were doing and performing in the cities across Europe, especially. So the series is called Sin Cities, And they go through, I think it was Shanghai was one. There's all European people involved in the setting up of the industry there. At Berlin was a basket case because they were paying so much, or Germany was paying so much in retribution money to the countries, the victors of World War I, that they couldn't get up and on their feet. And it was so easy to hire people to go on stage, like the Hoofers, as they call them in Hollywood, the dancing girls that they had in the U.S. Well, the whole idea of the dancing girls and on stage, hundreds of them, with very little on, actually came from the same guys who skipped out of Germany just before World War II, because they were doing it there with hundreds of girls, only they had them stark naked, and they really degraded them. And the same producers left Germany and scampered off to Hollywood, and it's in this series called Sin Cities. Well worth seeing if you can get a hold of them. Another one is called Hollywoodism. CBC again, taxpayer funded, where main producers in Hollywood discuss openly the fact that they gave modern America their culture. They gave it to them. In fact, what they say is before they came, America had no culture. That's in the documentary. You hear it from 2 or 3 different main top producers, well-known producers. Hollywoodism. It's interesting even in the occult, you know, when you look at cinema, and you understand the high occultic techniques of the use of letters, words, numbers, and so on. And if you just use the spoken word in reverse cinema, you have Amen is Amen, the god Amen. And that is no coincidence. George Orwell did a fantastic job with his book 1984, the title being chosen by the publisher. He wanted to call it The Last Man. And in the actual book it says, when Winston, the character, is being tortured by O'Brien asks him why. He keeps saying that the people will win, and Winston says, because we have to. And O'Brien says, well, why do you personally think that? He says, why do you think you have rights? He says, because I'm a man. And O'Brien says, well, if you're a man, Winston, you're the last man, meaning the last one of his type, a thinker, one who saw through the indoctrination. He was well aware that the intent was to eradicate the thinkers. And that isn't new. The communists did the same thing. Once they get in power, they round up all those that they used to get into power, the intellectuals, and kill them. And it wasn't just the communists who did that. Britain was very good at that too, for all the countries they got into and stole from over the centuries. And not just Britain either. It's been an ongoing thing with the main characters down through history that are called the Great, or whatever behind their name. These are part of the secret societies. You look at Alexander the Great's lifestyle, and who taught him, who was his personal tutor. And Aristotle was sent to be his personal tutor. Alexander himself declared himself a god. This is an ancient religion. It's still here, still on the go. So 1984 is well worth trying to get a hold of, the British version with John Hurt. Well worth looking at. And Richard Burton. Richard Burton plays O'Brien. They managed to cram quite a lot of the book in the movie. And you get the feeling from the movie of what Orwell was trying to get across. And Orwell knew, because he'd been trained to work for this establishment, and he was an ardent supporter of it till he found out that all of the sides, even the ones that he'd been fighting against, were all controlled by the same capstone. The British version was put out in 1984 to commemorate the book. Another one to look at is Fahrenheit 451. It's an older movie as well. And old is not bad. We've all been trained that new is good, change is good, new is good. But so much of the reality is shown in older movies. In Fahrenheit 451, it's a type of future where the firemen don't stop fires. They don't have to, because all houses are by law fireproofed. They don't burn. The firemen go out and they burn people who've stored up and hidden books, because it's forbidden to read books. Books cause dissension between people. So it's really a terrorist act to read books. Well, we're seeing too lots of little statements, little quips in there, which penetrate. A fairly recent movie is called The Others. The Others, I recommend to show how Plato's cave works. Now, Plato talks about how a reality is given to people, and he used the analogy of a cave, where those born into this cave and brought up in the cave, never outside the cave, and always looking towards the back of the cave, how they would view the world. That was their world. That was all of their world. And sure enough, they'd have a whole philosophy, a type of religion, a reality based around what they observed. And as the sun passed the mouth of the cave, and people even outside would walk past it, shadows would form on the back of the cave, and they'd have reasons for this. They would discuss the reasons, and it would all seem perfectly rational to them. But they never could turn around and look to the mouth of the cave. They were looking always towards the back. So anything out of the ordinary that happened, they'd have to fit it into their paradigm, their existing understanding of their reality. And they'd squash it in if need be, and stamp on it to get it in. A good example of how to create realities for people. He used the cave. In the movie The Others, similar to the movie Sixth Sense, they both have a bit of this in it. But in The Others, you'll find the main character, the woman, has to relate all the things that are happening around her into her existing paradigm, and how she was to extraordinary lengths, no matter what she's experiencing, to make it fit in to what she sees as her logical pattern, her understanding, until she has to face a truth. And this is how the system actually does work with people who are born into a system, and like all mammals, they look towards the parents for warnings of what they should be aware of. Now, if the parents have already been indoctrinated, and remember, all you have to do is indoctrinate the first generation, you have a new normalcy, a new normal. If they don't know to tell the children will never question the things around them. They'll think everything is quite natural. They've just evolved to where we are today, and everything that they use and are told to use, including money and so on, is all quite natural. And they're told what to talk about, what not to talk about, what's correct, what's not correct. Now, how can you be free if you cannot discuss anything or even ask a question out of curiosity? That's not freedom. That's legal tyranny. So check out The Others and Sixth Sense, because they do show, see, this type of Plato's cave. A very telling movie, Predictive Programming again, with a bit of a warning, was Gattaca. G-A-T-T-I-C-A, which revolves around a character in the near future where there are two classes of people. You have those who have been born or created the ordinary way, and those who have been genetically modified, supposedly to eliminate, and this is what we're hearing already and have been for a few years, they want to eliminate all possibilities of any defects in a child. So if you were prone, say, or if they claim you are prone to even an allergy or asthma or whatever, they could stop you from being born. We already have murmurings of this at the moment from this pseudo-scientific political elite. And in Gattaca, you have the class system where those who've been modified get all the jobs, the superior jobs, a new type of class distinction. And it's very telling, again, the movie. It's predictive programming because they know what's coming, and it is coming. It's only a part-way step with the total cloning, purpose-made clones. ID is a good play on idea. The big idea of Freemasonry is used in many different ways. And you have ID, your identification. And ID also means intelligent design. And that's what they're working towards, an intelligent design which would be more efficient to serve the elite than you or I. One of the older movies that showed us a sort of world police state, or even definitely an American police state, with high-tech weaponry to use against the public. And it came out at a time when Joe Public was scratching his head saying, why is this being shown now? Well, the big boys knew what was coming down the road in 20, 30 years. It's called Blue Thunder, with the high-tech helicopters able to see through your walls and watch you and listen to you as well, and armed to the teeth, of course, with the high-tech weaponry. We've all been conditioned to where we are today through all of these movies that most people have forgotten about, but they've seen bits and pieces here and there. But even though they've forgotten consciously most of the story, subconsciously the main parts have been downloaded into them, and that's why they've accepted the step-by-step process to totalitarianism so easily. They've been programmed to do so. The ancients knew that people had an infinite appetite for entertainment, and they supplied it to the people with drama. There's never been a time in history where so much is churned out from the same sources to the entire planet as today. And people can't get enough. They can't get enough. I've seen people come out of video stores with a stack that their weekend specials. They must watch TV 24 hours a day for Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And I'll guarantee you they'll remember very little of that consciously. But these are the most placid, system-orientated people you'll ever meet because they've been totally programmed subconsciously. They don't question anything that happens or comes along or is made law or anything else. They've been programmed. They're what can you say? A very interesting movie to do, again, in allegorical form. They show it one way in the movie, but it's allegory in a sense, a reality in another, is Dark City, which even brings in a very old theme to do with genetic history, where genes themselves have a certain history to them and are a memory, you might say, and how they can be manipulated and put into other people to give you someone else's memory, someone else's reality. Whatever we see in these movies, whatever they talk about in the actual science magazines, is old stuff. Whatever they say they're working on is old stuff, because that's level 1 reality. Anything that the public's allowed to know is technically obsolete. Even when they say on level 1 that they're just working on this thing right now, that's really obsolete. We're kept in the past always. The 2001 movie From Hell is an excellent movie to watch, based around the declassified information that was kept secret for 100 years by Scotland Yard on Jack the Ripper, with the conclusions and all the evidence pointing to the fact that the Queen's, the royal surgeon, was the very high Freemason of the Templar Lodge who did the killings. And it tells you why it had to be done. I know, too, that the person who first came out with this information was killed in it with a hit-and-run accident, I believe it was, in Britain some years back. But information in it is true, and the names are the real names that they use of the people involved. And for the first time it will make sense to you. It also shows you the high Masonic connection in all of this, where, see, if you want secrecy in a system, and Peter Wright, who worked for MI5, brought this out in his book, Spycatcher. He said that they're all told in those organizations to join Freemasonry because they swear to defend a brother Mason against all odds, be he right or wrong. It's the only way you can have this kind of secrecy kept from the public, where men literally will lie on the stand to save each other. And they do this all the time. That's why they all join Masonry, and police join Masonry, and the judge is a Mason. So check out that movie, From Hell. Well worth seeing. Probably the first movie to even show you parts of the rituals involved in Freemasonry in a movie version. Days of the Condor was made, had to be back in the 1970s, early 70s, with Michael Redford. And in the movie, they show you how the CIA go through potential future strategies. They play out these games to see if they'd ever, which they might have to use one day, to see if they could take over oil wells across the Middle East. And they even had the strategies laid down as to what they'd tell the public, why they'd have to go in there. They'd have to make events happen to authorize themselves to go in to take over the oil fields. It's not that people in Hollywood have a terrific imagination, or the writers who write for Hollywood. It's because they know they're connected, they have relatives in amongst the CIA. These kind of war games and strategies and possibility games go on all the time. They have a game for every scenario, basically, worked out in advance, and at least on computer all the bugs are ironed out. And they have backup plans, and plan A, B, C, D, E, and so on. Nothing really changes in the system. One thing that's always the same is the secrecy, incredible secrecy, incredible propaganda to cover the secrecy given out by media, to give us a fake reality. We're told what to think about, either sports or... for those people who've noticed, when they came out with the Weather Channel, used to get rain and snow and so on. Now everything's a crisis. You get an inch of rain, it's going to be a crisis and a storm, and a couple of inches of snow, oh, it's going to be a crisis, and people are terrified, and yada, yada, yada. Well, this is all intentional that they had to start making an issue of the weather, because they decided long ago they were going to use manipulation, scientific manipulation of the weather to cause crisis. And people who are still working for the United Nations put books out in the 1960s. At that time, they thought that it was easier to cause global cooling. And they had the coming ice age and different books put out there, and it was promoted by all the media. Massive crisis on its way, we're all going to freeze to death. But then, the more they experimented with spraying the skies, as we see every day, it's really, really bad up here right now. It's also bad in Chicago. They're getting sprayed crazily. And even to the west of Pennsylvania, they've been getting it heavy for the last couple of days. And they have sinusitis and the usual problems, and the media is, as always, dead quiet on it. But they realized eventually it was easier to cause warming. And you'll see that mushy stuff that the spray turns into, these mushy types of clouds. That's polymer. Polymer, it gives the effect of a polythene type film. It also helps the sun act and behave as it would under a magnifying glass. It intensifies heat. It causes heat build-up. And that's why you get the warming. And those who've been studying this and taken notes over the last 10, 15 years or so have all come to the same conclusions. When they spray heavily, the temperature goes up. So does the amount of infections of the bronchial tubes and sinuses and so on. And the media won't tell it. They won't talk about it. The media is not free. They're totally controlled. They're part of government. They give you the reality. They tell you what to think about, what to worry about, what to smile at, what not to smile at, what to frown at. And then there's always sports that come out your ears eventually. So much sports. That's all you see. Detective stories, law stories, hospital stories, and sports. What a choice. Has anyone noticed that these incredible, trashy TV series, like the CSI, to do with all the special scientific gizmos that police are using, these special units that go around there, and my God, they can detect things by special lights. But the bottom line is always get his DNA. Almost every second line is get his DNA. That's to indoctrinate the public into this new procedure, because they want everyone's DNA. Now the governments are admitting they've been taking people's DNA for 30 years and identifying it along with your name and storing it, you see. And they're doing it in major hospitals in California. I think every baby's done now. They want to own you. And it's the old story of Adam naming the animals, you see. You got power over the animal if you've got its DNA. Its name, its signature. That's what it's all about. And it's so monotonous, the trash they throw out one after the other. Get his DNA, get his DNA. And this whole thing is to make you think that science is holy. Science is holy. You can't question science. And we've already had scandals where people have been put in prison with the confirmation in the courts of the DNA matched. And then we found out later, no, they wanted the guy in prison, and so somebody along the way, often the scientist or the laboratory person, lied. But of course television gives you a different version, the drama. It's somehow a holy status. Again, the special birth canals that these people come out of, it's different from everybody else's. They wouldn't lie to the public. And this is the image they want us to have of these controlling authorities. Hogwash, you see. But it does well. It indoctrinates the people. We've had thousands of years of bowing and scraping and kissing the ground to idols, statues, and deities we can't see. And now we have this white-coated priesthood at the top that waggles test tubes and rattles them together, and has its own vocabulary, because every priesthood in every religion in every age has its own vocabulary to mystify the public. Up until not long ago, the Catholic Church still used Latin in the major Mass. And the people couldn't understand a word of it, but it sounded holy. You see, it's a holy language. This is the same language, mind you, that slaughtered thousands of Christians and fed them to lions. It was very holy then too, because then that same language was dedicating them to the other gods, you see. But with some nice music and guys wearing dresses, you can really con the public. And you think it's holy. Holy, yeah. Latin is holy. Latin was used with the Romans when they slaughtered thousands of people going through Europe. Very holy language then as well. And they used to burn your intestines as an enemy. And the lares, the fire of the families, they'd dedicate your intestines. They'd rip it out your body and burn them in front of your face before you'd croaked. And that was dedicating it to the fire, the holy fire that was the spirits of their ancestors. Because just like the modern ones who are descended from them all, they believe that they reincarnate into the same family lineages. And that's why they're so smart, you see, and powerful. And, well, they certainly are cruel. They have an edge on that. They understand cruelty to keep the public in check. But yeah, now we have a white-coated priesthood that thinks nothing of taking animals, bashing them on the head with all kinds of gizmos, and then reading their brainwaves to see how it affects them. Well, why don't they try it with the scientists? It might knock some sense into them. And they use people as well as guinea pigs all the time. All the time. For donkey's years, again, through the start of television, back in the 50s, they were giving you the medical dramas right away to holify, make it holy, the doctors and the nurses in hospital, and the science, you see, of medicine. And in no time at all, they started in Britain and in other countries where they had national health care systems, whipping out your tonsils and your adenoids. And it became routine to do so to children who were not old enough to understand anything, generally 4 or 5. And the excuse they give, again, first through drama, and then through reality to the public, the excuse they gave was, well, these appendages are from, well, you don't need them anymore. You see, we used to be apes, and we used to walk around with our heads pointing towards the ground. And when we stand up, that's why your sinuses get infected, and then your tonsils get it as well. So we'll just whip these off, and same with your appendix, these vestiges of when you were an ape, you see. And this was taught as fact, even though the Darwinian theory has never been proven. It's a theory is a guess. That's what it means. It's a guess, and it only becomes a scientific theory when a bunch of scientists have consensus that that guess might be right. That's all. So your guess is as good as anybody else's. Make a few on all these topics. You'd be surprised what you might find out. But all of this is promoted through drama, generally with the big hero, the male hero, who goes through all hell and back to save humanity or do something special for the public, and you're left with all this data in your head, downloaded, that's a good thing. You haven't even really made an opinion on it. It's been done for you. Because when you're being entertained through fiction, the sensus part of your brain that says, yeah, I agree with this, no, I disagree with that, it doesn't work. It switches itself off. And it's the same with hypnosis. When you're staring at something, an object, it doesn't matter what it is, although something to do with light or flickering lights is very helpful, then that sensus part of your brain switches off. You're now under a form of hypnosis. Your guard is down. You don't think that anything nasty is going to be done to you. And it's done in such a way that appeals to you because, as I say, you identify with the main characters in the movie. And by this identification, they can take you on any path they wish, any path at all. And you go right along with it, never stopping you for a second and say, wait a minute, is this right or is it wrong? Because the movie can make anything seem correct. And you're being downloaded and indoctrinated as you enjoy yourself. And you will not remember too much about the movie in a couple of years or even 1 year, and a lot of people in a few months or weeks or days. But you will allow certain things to happen to you in society without question. You have been programmed. It was about the mid-60s when the format of news media changed around the world. Prior to that, we never had sports or entertainment mixed in with news, at least in most of the European countries. The only time you saw anything to do with sports was on a Saturday, during the day as well, and regular programming in the evening. But it was mandated and talked about by H.G. Wells and others that they'd eventually make a craze of sports, a diversion from the public where they could let off steam and do it in a socially acceptable form rather than run up to their Parliament building and do the dirty. And this has been done all over the world. And you've seen, too, the build-up of Hollywood in the news media. As though we should really care who's marrying who's divorced who, or who's having an affair with who, or what. But again, it's lifted up to almost a holy status. Yet these people, these actors, are very unhappy people. They don't even know who they are most of the time. An actor, if they're any good at all, gets into the part. They adopt the identity of the character. And after you've adopted a whole bunch of different characters, you sort of lose track of who you are yourself. They're not happy at all. And they're secluded from the public. They're kept apart from the public. All they can do is mix with each other, and they act to each other all the time. They're never real towards each other. But they want us to follow the stars, because once in a while they'll pull one out and speak on behalf of a political party or some NGO group that wants change or laws. Generally it's laws put in about something that's going to affect you. And because they're up there, you see, on a stage, and this is a trick to the occult from the most ancient times. The word altar and altar are spoken in the same way. The spoken word on the bottom level is the key, on the bottom level. When you put someone on an altar, you alter them. They're no longer an everyday person. They're someone special. They've been risen on a platform above all other men and women. They're raised up. All Masonic terminology, once more, they are above all the rest. They are holy, a holy stature, and suddenly they're important. And we've been trained to almost worship these people that are put up there. And people do worship them, in fact, with hysteria. Because the same dynamics are at play thousands of years ago as to today. It hasn't changed at all. The psychodynamics that work into play. This happened in the fields of Eleusis in ancient Greece. It happened with the worship of Tammuz in the Middle East. It's Adonis, the worship of Adonis, as the Greeks called it, when they ran Egypt eventually. And the women always went hysterical when the priesthood or the deity or the figure of the deity was raised up on the platform above the rest. It hasn't changed. We've seen it with pop stars, rock stars, and they're all called stars, as I say, for a very good reason, because you're meant to follow them. Interestingly enough, in the book, it's called Hollywood Babylon. There are 2 volumes. Well worth the read, because it gives you a lot of occultic stuff, not out in the open, it's tongue-in-cheek, but the person who wrote them understood it very well by the selection of words he uses. And he even uses a dedication that came from Aleister Crowley of the OTO, sent out by MI6 to create mystery and confusion in the world with his special order of Freemasonry. He didn't create the OTO, actually, but he took it over and became the head. Because all Freemasonry goes back to London, regardless of what country you think it's from. It goes back to London. And Aleister Crowley certainly did his stuff to create the mystery and attract the youth in. And that was a burgeoning culture at that time to do with drugs back in the 1920s. Again, pushed through Hollywood and the music scene as always. But in this movie, Hollywood Babylon, or this book, Hollywood Babylon, he dedicates the page to Aleister Crowley, where Crowley states that every man and woman is a star. Occultic significance, if you understand it, but is overlaid with a picture at the back of people on a stage, because those people pretend that they are you and me. They are the men and women. We are the profane. That's what it really means. And another book to read is Movie to Beachhead, or maybe Movie Lot to Beachhead. It tells you how Hollywood worked hand in glove with the military to make propaganda movies to get the young men to join up. Lots of photographs. There's so many photographs in there. And it even shows you the techniques, the psychological techniques, as they portrayed the hero figure to the youth to make them join up. And of course, lots of female stars to make this little schmuck think that once he signed up he might get this particular star, which is dreamland indeed. But that's how simple it works for little guys who are young, come from generally poor backgrounds, have no status in the world, and they put on that uniform and suddenly they're approved by everybody. You're a somebody suddenly. Mind you, once you're buried and so on, you're quickly forgotten. Or if you're crippled, you're definitely quickly forgotten, especially in the United States. So all those things that you think are normal out there and are there just for the money and just to give you what you ask for, you can be further from the truth. This is culture, creation, containment. It gives you direction. It limits your thinking. It programs you for a fixed, planned society, the next step and the next step into the future. And you go along, never dreaming, never ever dreaming that the choices you're making are not your choices at all. You're just regurgitating your program and carrying it out. Your opinions on the political level, the sociological level, on every level, are given to you through drama. And from those that you've been taught to follow as stars, to worship. Even though most of the propaganda you get from the TV on the Hollywood scandals and so on. It's all nonsense. It's as much fakery as the movies themselves. It's to intrigue you and draw you in to fantasy. So check out some of these movies. I'm sure some of you will learn something from them, to see how blatant and legalistic, by showing you these things, Hollywood can be. Have a good weekend. Tune in to Red Ice from Sweden on Sunday for the live streaming of the show. I'll be on. Good night for now, and may your God